For more discussion on COP29's goal to scale up climate finance, we're now joined by Bledsoe. He's president of Bledsoe and Associates, a public policy firm and a former Clinton White House climate advisor. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. One of the key goals of COP29 is to decide just how much financial support wealthy countries should provide to less wealthy ones for tackling climate change. Why is it proving so difficult to reach an agreement and pinpoint a number, do you think?
Well, there are many reasons. One is that much of the world is still, their economies are still recovering from the COVID crisis. Another is that we haven't really explored all the avenues available to us. Just in the last few days, there's begun to be a group of countries, including France, Spain, Kenya, who've begun to look at other avenues that might perhaps raise much more money in the long run than voluntary pledges from governments. They're looking at things like taxes on shipping, very small taxes, but they add up, or on financial transactions that could generate truly large, hundreds of billions of dollars a year, because the needs of the developing countries whose economies and populations are being impacted by climate change impacts are huge. We're talking about literally trillions of dollars a year, and maybe tens of trillions of dollars a year in the next decade or two. And so the amounts of money that just come from voluntary government-led contributions are not probably going to be enough in the long run.
And sir, the transition away from fossil fuels is another major sticking point. Why is there so much resistance, and what's being proposed to address this challenge?
So a number of petrostates led by Saudi Arabia are attempting to undermine language that would dedicate the UN and 200 countries toward a phase down of reliance on fossil fuels. And so this is an effort by Saudi Arabia and other petrostates to continue to dominate the global energy sphere. The good news is that the costs of clean energy are coming down very, very quickly, and that other forms of energy, particularly solar, but also wind and other new sources of energy, are beginning to come on that in the long run can help us phase out fossil fuels, yet still provide energy for the world's poorer countries.
And some countries, including Saudi Arabia, have pushed back against a universal commitment to phase out fossil fuels. What does this mean for global efforts to help limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius?
It's a good question. I think it's symbolically important, but I think what really matters is to reduce the costs of alternatives to fossil fuels, particularly alternatives to coal and to oil. If we can do that, then these proclamations are less important. The other thing we've got to focus on, in addition to carbon dioxide, the main greenhouse gas, is reducing methane emissions from fossil fuels. The largest emitter in the world is China. The U.S. is a large emitter. Russia is a very large emitter. So is India. Methane emissions are the key reason that near-term temperatures continue to rise. Yet if we cut methane, we can limit near-term temperature rise, which has already hit the Paris goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we've already gone through the limit on temperatures that we'd hoped to avoid 10 years ago. It's very urgent that we begin to focus on methane. That's the best, fastest way to limit near-term temperature increases.
You know, COP29 has turned out to be much more contentious than many people thought it would be. Given the challenges faced in Baku, what steps could be taken to make future climate summits more effective and results-oriented?
You know, I think China has been a leader in clean energy and working with developing countries. I do think China needs to revisit its stance on labeling itself as a developed country because it has the second world's largest economy. But the other thing we need to think about doing is avoiding these huge annual meetings and breaking up the meetings into quarterly meetings on smaller specific issues. There's a group of climate experts who put forward a proposal to do that. I think that the annual meetings have gotten too big and too cumbersome. It may be better to move to quarterly meetings focused on very specific outcomes that may produce better results.